The live chat listener from ListenLayer easily allows you to track all chat activity from your livechat.com account. Once the listener is turned on, you're going to want to jump to features and enable some of the chat activity features here. Now, each of these activity features pushes information and structured data into the data layer when specific activity occurs on your website through live chat. You can use this to easily power all of your web analytics tracking by simply creating triggers based on these events and pulling in values from the data layer based on the chat activity itself. This can be very powerful as it allows you to scale and enhance your web analytics tracking very easily. So taking a look at the features themselves, we can track when a chat begins. We can track every time a message is sent from the user to the agent, every time a message is sent from the agent back to the user, and when a user enters their email into the chat. Again, each of these will trigger events, and if you go to the event settings screen here, you can see those individual events, and there will oftentimes be additional settings that become available at the event level. Now, if you're just turning on live chat for the first time, you'll see in the variable settings screen that none of this information will appear. And that's because your chat activity hasn't been collected yet by the listeners from ListenLayer. So if this screen is empty, you'll want to make sure that back in features, you turn on some of these activity elements and that you publish your changes and that your ListenLayer tag is present on your website. And then the listeners will automatically collect information as chats occur and populate all of the data layer variables, the automatic ones, inside here so that you can use them to write really powerful rules. So let's take a look at what this does on an actual live website. We're going to first publish our changes. So here we are on a live website. And I'm actually going to do, we're connected to the debug tool from GTM, but I'm going to do a little bit of a hard refresh to make sure we get everything. It says our debug is connected here, and I'm going to actually begin a chat. And what you notice is that we have a rule here required to start a chat where we actually have to enter our information before the chat starts. So as a user, once I submitted this information based on my live chat configuration, my chat has actually begun, meaning now the agent has received my original message. They actually didn't receive this message until I entered this information. And what we see over here is that we can initially see that the user entered their email address and that the user also sent a message in. Now, because of how this occurred, we're not actually seeing the live chat started event because the event starts with the user entering their email address. So your events might vary depending on exactly how you have your live chat configured. Now we have an agent has responded, and we can see in our data layer again, there is a response. So let's drill into this data layer activity so we can see what it is that ListenLayer is doing. If we look at our console, there's individual objects that are going to be available that we make readily visible here. These represent what's being pushed into the data layer. So the first one was when the user entered their email address. And you can see we collect automatic values, but we also push custom values into the data layer. None of those exist yet because you have to actually write rules in ListenLayer to push custom values in. It's one of the most powerful features of ListenLayer that allows you to customize your web analytics tracking without requiring any programming or development. Within the chat, the automatic fields that we've collected from the chat, we just collect some automatic information based on the activity that occurred. So in this case, we're confirming that yes, the user has entered their email. So you could grab this variable to do something with that. And we've also confirmed the location that this user is on. In addition, you can see we've actually captured the fields that the user submitted as they began their live chat activity. Now, this looks very similar inside of Google Tag Manager. The data layer push from ListenLayer exists right here, and you can see it kind of broken out a little bit differently, but all those same elements. Google Tag Manager reads that and makes it available in their latest version of the data layer information. And you can use these events and these variables to create specific triggers and capture information in Google Tag Manager to power all of your web analytics tracking. You can see here, as the user entered their email address, we've also put some information. And apparently we actually had a chat occurring earlier today from this user. And so the user's message count is already set to 3 because this particular user was probably chatting with us earlier in the day. If this was an actual chat that had started from scratch, this would say 1. And one thing you might want to do is utilize this message count to write a rule that would identify in your custom values when a chat becomes a high quality chat. And we can look at that as an example when we dive into the custom values feature. You can take a look at that here. So looking back at our debug tool, again, when the agent responded, we have some additional information that the agent has responded. This is the agent's 4th message in this overall message string because the user had already interacted with us before earlier today. The actual message counts and that information is stored in the user's browser. And so that would need to be fully cleared out, which is why if a user converses with you multiple times, it's going to be a cumulative number. Now down here, we see the agent information as well as the user's information and counts. And that's because Google Tag Manager reads the data layer and shows you all the available pieces of information in the data layer at that point in time that have not been overwritten with something else. And so at this particular event and message, you can see this data is what was pushed in, but this data is what's available to us in our tagging at this point in time because of these other events that maybe occurred prior to this. So jumping back into Listen Layer, there are a few other features that we could take a look at. The custom data layer values is something I recommend you spending some time in. This is the most powerful feature within Listen Layer. It allows you to fully customize your web analytics tracking and add a lot of segmentation and enhance your data. Browser storage allows you to store data into the user's browser based on their activity. So you can store cookies, you can use local storage or session storage to save information. In addition, you can write rules to monitor activity on your website. For example, if you haven't received a chat for a certain number of days, you can trigger a rule to yourself so that you can come in here and check and see maybe my conversion tracking is broken for some reason. You can also trigger rules based on activity actually occurring. And then lastly, you can turn on reporting, which would allow you to collect event information directly inside of Listen Layer. This can be very useful if, for example, you don't necessarily want to send every single event into a tool like Google Analytics, but you still want to see how those events are occurring. For example, we might not even send chat started into Google Analytics. We might just leave that in Listen Layer. We might only send conversions to Google Analytics when a high quality chat occurs based on the user's message count. In that case, the reporting feature in Listen Layer can be very valuable.